unless it really pisses us off. Like in Jericho.
Hey, we're live.
Okay. Are we really?
Yeah, we are.
Wow. I didn't see that.
I wonder if they say that to the SNL guys, hey, we're live.
Yeah.
Are we really live?
It's just that you guys don't pay any attention to me. Like I say all the cues. I say 5 minutes, say it's time to go live. Okay. And then you're just over there. It's like,
I didn't see the 3, 2. Are we seriously live?
We are seriously live.
It's Sunday. And once again, we have found out that hot spinning air is not just coming from Tallahassee. And we'll get into that and more issues when we get into the rotation. In my soul, you're a corner in my heart. Yeah, that's basically it.
I know it doesn't look like this is run smoothly, but as far as like my back end, so smooth.
we are semi-professional.
Well, that's only because you're pressed up against the wall.
Yeah, because
it's not smooth when you're not.
I'm used to stretching out now, and now you've showed up.
Well, I'm so glad everybody is here today, because for those who are watching us live streaming, and for those of us who are watching us later on, I'm so glad you weren't here at the beginning when we were disjuntled. But we're all set up now, and we are hopefully have survived the storm, especially Chris, who was actually in Maryland and didn't actually get this storm, which was kind of nice.
Oh, just wrap me out for being a bad Floridian, Gary.
Yeah, no problem. I mean,
it's like, what's a hurricane?
I love that guy who was actually from Michigan, who moved down to Florida. Now he wants to run for Senate in Michigan again. And now he's trying to pretend that he actually lives in Michigan because he bought a shack that's not even half built yet. But it just goes to show you he is now officially a Florida man. Absolutely lively. Hey, let's start out with introductions here. My name is Gary Stein. I'm the political director here for Suncoast Normal and our Master of Public Health. To my right, I think your left possibly, is our Deputy Director and Master of Business Administration, Carlos Angel Jose Armida.
Thank you so much.
And above us, and and to the left, like in Maryland, we have our Executive Director, Chris Cano. Chris, how we doing?
Doing good, Gary. Doing good.
And of course, he is our Master of Public Administration, making us the masters of cannabis. We went through one hell of a storm, and we are so glad that everybody's pretty much standing back on their feet again. Although it's I got to tell you, it was interesting not having power for quite a few days. You really, really miss it. I don't miss the sound of the generators going on out there and now the buzz saws, but it's all a sign of progress. And we are in a big, and here comes the big segue, and we are looking for progress in this coming election. And that means we need to get better legislators because, quite frankly, the last batch or 2 or 3 have not been in the public's best interest. I don't understand how someone can get into public office and then all of a sudden start working to thwart the will of the people. But we have seen this time and time again. And so we are working on highlighting various legislative candidates across the state to see what they can do to improve and give you better ideas of who to vote for when you get to that ballot box. I mean, we do believe in getting out the vote, not suppressing the vote. And so we want everybody to be educated. And our guest today on our upper right-hand cover, coming to us from DeLand. I'm not going to call it Deltona again because it's all the same area. It has a bunch of duh in front of it. But Rosemarie, you are a nurse practitioner, correct?
I am. You are correct.
It is good to see somebody else medical going for the legislature because we've had various doctors in the past who I don't understand their practices, but I do know that they have been doing a lot in Tallahassee to regulate looser regulations for nurse practitioners to be able to do more. Because in this current medical system we have here, too often the doctors are working as overlords of multi-site practices, and it's the nurse practitioners that do more face-to-face than the doctors do nowadays. And so now they gave you a greater ability to prescribe. You can even Baker Act people if you feel necessary now.
Right. And what they have done, Gary, and I'm glad that you have addressed that, but the Florida legislature is making progress. It's very, very slow. I've been a nurse practitioner for 25 years and a nurse for 43 years. But finally, legislation did go through for primary care nurse practitioners to have autonomous practice. And, after we have fulfilled certain requirements set by the state, including supervised practice for a certain amount of time, the proper education, and the proper practice, we can actually practice independently now without the supervision of a physician. So I've been doing this primary care for 25 years. I think I've met the requirements, and I am an autonomous nurse practitioner. As far as prescribing, we have always had the right for prescribing. What they have liberalized our prescriptive authority is for controlled substances. And that was a 20-year fought battle to get the ability to prescribe controlled substances. And I will also say that we did not have prescriptive ability for controlled substances when Florida was in the midst of the opioid epidemic. So nurse practitioners cannot be blamed for that issue that the state of Florida had to endure and still are feeling the long-term effects of.
Well, that's kind of bittersweet. I mean, you can't be blamed. However, there's somebody who can. and that is basically the issue. And I guess one of the things that we have been talking about for years now, because we have a quasi medical program as far as cannabis is concerned here in the state, is to how much doctors can insert themselves between the practitioner and the patient. And it's great that you guys have more regulations to loosen the regulations that were previously there and allow you to practice more. But then again, they're also coming in there saying that women shouldn't have full autonomy over their own medical practices. And we'll get into that in just a moment, of course. And even when it comes to cannabis is concerned, they're saying that they feel that they should decide whether or not someone can have access to cannabis medically. And they narrowed it down to just 10 qualifying conditions, one with one umbrella at the end there, which really does take a lot of mental gymnastics to fit into the 10. Like, for instance, you have PTSD, but they don't have chronic anxiety syndrome. So therefore, they have to kind of say, well, yeah, they're exactly the same thing. Not really, as you well know. Chronic anxiety can come from a number of issues, both chemical as well as nurture versus nature kind of situation.
Well, Gary, I want to chime in here on this issue as well, because Rosemarie brought up a key thing about prescriptions. And in the state of Florida and in every other medical cannabis state, it is not a prescription that a doctor gives you for cannabis. It is a recommendation, because by federal law, no one can prescribe a Schedule I drug. Schedule I drugs are thought to have no medical value. And that is part of the irony and also fraud of cannabis prohibition from the federal government. Now, on December 2nd of this year, Normal has requested to testify in front of the DEA, and we'll see, if we get selected. But all in all, the DEA is holding a rescheduling hearing of cannabis at the request of President Joe Biden and the Biden administration to address, whether or not it belongs in Schedule I. Now, if they move it to Schedule III, that changes things a little bit in regards to, how cannabis can be utilized. But the fact is, and we have a comment here in the chat, Carlos, if you want to run that across the screen, folks are asking, is Big Pharma going to prevent people from growing their own personal use cannabis if marijuana is legalized? Mm-hmm. Well, understand that moving from Schedule I to Schedule III doesn't actually legalize it. It's still a controlled substance. On top of it, Schedule III's testing requirements from the Food and Drug Administration will never be able to control scientifically for botanical forms of cannabis. So you're not going to see real legalization under Schedule III. Normal continues to maintain that cannabis should be descheduled. There is also a push from certain legislators in Congress to want to see it also descheduled or removed again, have another scheduling hearing in the near future from Schedule III to maybe 4 or 5, or taken off the schedule as we advocate. So, one thing that we have seen in other states is the addition of more qualifying conditions. I'm glad you brought that up, Gary. Most recently, we've seen in a couple states, orgasm disorder has been added as a qualifying condition. So there's more and more scientific evidence every day coming out that cannabis helps with a wide variety of issues. We've seen other states add autism to it as a qualifying condition.
So hysteria is actually a qualifying condition then. Look it up, guys. Hysteria.
I find it very fortunate that there's a nurse on the. What the hell is orgasm disorder?
Well, there's a lady on the show, so I won't be so crass. But
we're not going to get into bent carrots and stuff, are we?
Well, I mean, what is it? Anything that qualifies, like, is like, I have an eating disorder because I eat too much, but an eating disorder is like anything, like, like it could be, oh, hey, I'm right there in the spotlight. Now, an eating disorder can be anything, right? So like you don't eat too much, you throw up, you eat too much, right? Orgasm, too many orgasms, not enough orgasms. Well, orgasm weird, like what is?
There's actually conditions where people tend to have orgasms without actual triggers. They could be just walking down the street, sitting in their home, wherever.
Is that
sitting in a lecture hall, and all of a sudden, boom.
So then, like, marijuana would stop the orgasms from happening in public?
Yeah.
I haven't seen this. I haven't seen the research yet, but I sure as hell would like to read that.
Well, it's interesting, but there are separate petitions to add female orgasm disorder into states, Oregon, Colorado, New Jersey, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Arkansas as a qualifying condition. Ohio, Connecticut, Illinois, and New Mexico have them pending. And so it's Oregon that adopted it. Female orgasm disorder is defined as a persistent or recurrent delay or absence of orgasm despite sexual stimulation. So, I mean,
exactly the opposite of what I was talking about before.
Basically, you suffer from this if your husband is a Trump supporter.
I can see that happening. I can definitely see that happening.
And the poster in the bedroom doesn't help either.
So cannabis can help you help women at least have that orgasm if your husband votes for Trump.
I think what I'd like to do is shift for a moment because I know where this is going. I don't like it where we might end up. So let me get back to our candidate here and discuss, Rosemarie. First off, what things made you decide to run for this position as a nurse and as a Floridian for many, many, many years? What made you say that I need to do more than just sit on the sidelines doing my job?
There you go. That's the $1 million question. And, I am the Democratic candidate for Florida House District 29. And just for those who need to know, District 29 is DeLand, Deltona, Lake Helen, Enterprise, Osteen, and it goes east part of the county over to Spruce Creek Fly-In and a bit of Port Orange. And the reason we are so carved up is gerrymandering. You can be in DeLand and cross the street and you're in District 27 on one side of the street and District 29 on the other side of the street. But yet we have to go through the woods to get all the way over to Spruce Creek Fly-In in the east side of the county. So the way the district is carved up, we can all discuss on another day why it is that way. But nonetheless, I am running to represent District 29 in those geographic locations. And why am I doing this? Well, I became increasingly frustrated. I've had a 44-year career in nursing and getting retirement is on the horizon, but I have been so frustrated with seeing the direction that the state is going. It is just, I've lived here for 53 years and the state is going in the absolute wrong direction. And wringing my hands and, pacing and doing as much as I could with volunteering and working during elections and stuff. And I kept saying, somebody's got to do something about that. Somebody's got to do something about that. And then finally, when I said it, I was looking in the mirror and said, okay, I've got to do something about it because as a nurse practitioner and as a primary care nurse practitioner, I have people in my office every day. And, nursing is one of the most respected careers that there is. If you look at the statistics year over year, nurses are always number one when it comes to the trust that people have. The only year that nurses were number 2 was after 9/11, when first responders became number 1. But then the next year we were right back at number 1 again. So even though a lot of what I do in my office is the same as what a primary care physician would do, I'm a nurse practitioner, and we approach things just a little bit differently and take a little bit more of a holistic approach. And people have a comfort level with talking to us and opening up and, telling us not only what their medical concerns are, but also what's going on in their life. And, I have some families I treat 3 generations, which is an absolute honor. And so I get to see, the 3 generations worth of a family and, become part of the family dynamics and understand what goes on. So the long answer to your question is I see what people are going through. I see the struggles that they're having, and I see their needs are not being met. And we live in a country, for goodness sake, that is the best, biggest, wealthiest country. Why are people's basic needs not being met? And why are we not at the state level when we do have the funds to meet people's needs? But how are these funds being used? So that is why I chose to run, because if you are not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And democracy is not a spectator sport. We need to get out there and we need to participate and take part. And I felt like the experience that I have had as an advocate in nursing for 44 years, I could easily transfer to being an advocate in Tallahassee for the people. And I, had 44 years of on-the-job training of listening to people and understanding what is going on. And so that's why I chose to run.
Now, sometimes the purveyors of our medical institutes here in this country are their own worst enemies as far as moving forward, and especially when they try to link in with the government. Now, I remember that there was a huge fight in Tallahassee in regards to the amount of LIP, or low income patient funds, that were supposed to go towards the hospitals. And yet, what I found out in the long run is oftentimes the more LIP funds that hospitals get, the more they allow the practice of using the emergency room for primary care, which is not the way it's supposed to be. It's a hell of a lot more expensive, and it certainly does usurp the funds from the government that can be used to spread out to so many other people who don't have access to hardly anything. And we don't have enough accountable care organizations to cover everybody that's out there. And so much has to go back to I think that the primary care physician and the family doctor kind of situation, which we've gone so far away from. And it also has to do with changing the cost of practically everything the way we go.
Right.
So you want to straddle that line between how the government handles medicine versus how people in medical groups handle medicine. And I guess you have a better view from your point of view, as opposed to so many other doctors who come into the legislature and they still believe, for some odd reason, that they've been told that cannabis causes psychosis on a grand scale. And we know that's not to be the fact. And yet we have people who are doctors, who are in the legislature, who still believe these fallacies have been going around since the 1930s, practically, about how evil cannabis can be and what harm it does. What is your viewpoint on medical use of cannabis? Let's go with that.
Well, I see so many people who suffer from so many different things, and they resort to so many self-destructive behaviors in order to control the things that are plaguing them, basically. And, when we look at prescriptions, when we look at prescription abuse, the use of different medicines long term, sometimes, it's like, man, Mother Nature provides us with a lot of the things that we need to heal. And oftentimes, I wish my patients would just make use of cannabis rather than the other self-destructive behaviors that they do. And, we can segue into alcohol, for that matter, a perfectly legal substance that, people abuse on a routine basis. in order to self-medicate and to help them heal again what is bothering them. I really was very happy when medical marijuana did come as an option for treatment, because I think it has been so helpful for so many of my patients for so many reasons, including we're talking about chronic pain issues, we're talking about sleep issues, and anxiety issues as well. So I have definitely in practice seen the place for medical marijuana. I am not a provider, because only physicians can do that. And you have to be specifically licensed to be a medical marijuana prescriber. And so I do not certainly meet those qualifications. But I do have patients who do use medical marijuana, and I support their choice in doing so.
Well,
Now, go
Gary,
ahead.
I wanted to chime in here. The American Nurses Association was one of the first major medical associations in this country to get it right on cannabis. The association represents more than 5 million registered nurses across the country, and they've been pushing for reclassifying marijuana since 2021, and have been providing safe access to therapeutic marijuana and related cannabinoids for over 20 years. And in September of last year, they actually officially recognized cannabis as a formal specialty nursing practice area. And, we now have the American Cannabis Nurses Association, which advocates for research, education, and policy reform around medical marijuana. And they are really, pioneering cannabis in the nursing field and contributing to the broader landscape of the nursing practice and patient care. Even the American Nurses Association said it's an essential role and a special contribution of cannabis nurses to the healthcare system that promotes and enhances the integration of cannabis therapies for healthcare consumers, across a diverse healthcare setting. And so, it's definitely great to see, the American Nurses Association, recognize it as a nursing specialty. I wanted to ask Rosemarie, if you're elected to the legislature, we'd be happy to work with you, like we have with so many of our other legislators, to write legislation to expand, recommendations to, nurse practitioners in the state of Florida, much in the same way, you all recommend other therapies for folks that typically have been reserved for physicians. So, we're happy to work with you
I
on
think
that.
that'd be a great move. I mean, from everything you just said, Kano, it sounds like nurses are smarter than doctors.
My mom, who's been a nurse for 40 years, would say
There
exactly
you go.
that.
I mean, I don't want to say that nurses are smarter than doctors, but I mean, it would make a whole heck of a lot of sense to say that nurses are maybe a little bit more in tune to what a patient needs
There you go.
than what a doctor.
They certainly have a lot more face time with the patients than doctors do nowadays.
So, and I'm sorry, Gary, I know you're dying to ask a question.
No, I'm
just
watching you here.
I'm just dying to ask Rosemarie a question just from her medical experience. I coming from the hemp industry and having dealt with all that hemp bill nonsense last year, one of the biggest criticisms about the hemp industry is that children can get a hold of hemp, and they say that this is a reason of concern because there were so many phone calls to the CDC about children getting their hands on hemp. If a kid gets a hold of THC, right, they find their parents' gummies, right? What would you recommend? What would necessarily happen?
Well, I cannot answer that question. Unfortunately.
Well, what do you know what necessarily would happen? Like what would the procedure be if they go into the hospital or something like that?
A parent comes into your practice sweating and saying, "My child ate this cannabis. What do we need to go to the emergency room? What do we need to do?"
What I would do would be to call poison control. That's always the first step. You call poison control, and poison control guides you on, you have to kind of let them know what substance the child, or anyone for that matter, who has ingested any sort of substance that could be toxic to their body based upon, first of all, you're not supposed to put that in your body, from bleach, okay, to unintentional ingestion of THC or cannabis. But even in a child, what could be safe for an adult, of course, for a child could be quite dangerous. So you'd have to contact poison control, first of all. I'm sure I don't work in an emergency setting. I could not attest to whether or not there's emergency protocol for immediate ingestion. A lot of times, activated charcoal is used to help blunt absorption of different substances that should not have been ingested. But you always call poison control. You tell them what substance has been ingested. You give them the vitals or demographics, how tall, how much they weigh, how old are they, of the person who has ingested, and then poison control guides you for the emergent treatment for that.
And of course, poison control takes care of everybody from this accidental whatever cannabis ingestion to kids taking a bunch of Tylenol.
Exactly.
Which is actually one of the most frequent calls to poison control. My kid took a bunch of my 500 milligram Tylenol. What do I do?
Oh my God. And that's scary. That is really scary.
Take your meds away from your kids for one
I
thing.
honestly think it's interesting that the procedures to make that phone call. I thought those phone calls were done before. Like, I thought a parent would make that phone call and then they'd be like, take the kid to the emergency room or something like that.
Well, it can happen both ways. A lot of times, I can remember when my children were young, one of my kids ate a podocarpus berry. Well, I had no idea if a podocarpus berry was toxic or not. I called poison control and I asked them, and they were extremely helpful. And no, it did not require a trip to the emergency room, but it all depends on that parent's level of anxiety per se. But yet the other thing is there may be a fear factor as well, because you're talking about a child getting a hold of a substance such as either a prescribed med or something that might be of question, and now you're opening up fear in parents. Are we going to have child services investigating something like this for a child getting a hold of marijuana or some other drug?
Now, do you still continue to look into continuing education credits and do you see any courses out there for currently practicing doctors and nurse practitioners and nurses in regards to cannabis?
There are, we always have to have continuing ed. That's a requirement for license renewal. And so there are mandatory continuing ed units that we have to take. And then there are also a cluster of hours that we can choose applicable classes to take to our field or something if we want to even become more educated on something. And yes, there's always that option for taking classes to expand knowledge and expertise with cannabis.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about this. Just a quick PSA to parents out there. If you are a parent who utilizes some type of form of cannabis therapy, in whether your kids are 17 or 7, lock them up, especially if they're 17, because they're going to pinch off your stash. But if if you have smaller kids, you have toddlers, you have kids who they look in the fridge in the garage and they see cookies or gummies, that could be an issue. So make sure that you lock them up. Now, according to WebMD, there are no overdose deaths that have been reported to children due to edible intoxication, even though it can be very frightening. It says that if symptoms are serious, they may need an ER visit. And in the ER, they typically give them oxygen or IV fluids to help process it. Now, I asked I asked the same question to my mom, who's a nurse, and she said, typically they just, give the kids fluid and let them sleep it off. So, of course, take any type of ingestion of a controlled substance seriously with your kids. I would say this much: if it's your pet, it's a different story. There is issues of toxicity in certain pets. My pet accidentally back in 2018, she ate 180 milligrams worth of brownies off of my coffee table and chewed up the plastic too that they were in. And she was high for 2 days. So,
yeah, but the chocolate was actually more toxic to your dog.
That's right, for the dog.
Exactly. But I would say this much: I did not take her to the vet because my neighbor had the same issue with his dog, and the $600 vet bill for the vet to tell him just let the dog sleep it off was something that scared me. So, if you're dealing with a high dog, let them sleep it off. The smaller the animal, you may want to, don't let your hamster get in your edibles. I don't know how that's going to work.
Also, vets do not have HIPAA laws. Mm-hmm. So if a vet is so concerned, they could possibly contact authorities in regards to your dogs having access to cannabis in their home and wonder where you got it from and yada, yada, yada. So that is one of the bills that we've actually worked on last year. We hope to put it again this next session. Is that if you are a parent who uses cannabis to maintain your mood stabilization, things of that sort, if the Department of Children and Families comes into your home for whatever reason, and they see cannabis in your home, even if you have a medical cannabis, they can petition to have your kids taken away, despite the fact that using cannabis at that point in time makes you a far more clear-headed and active parent, whereas without it, you may not be as good of a parent in the first place. And so we're trying to make certain that if there is a situation where the only situation they find is that there's cannabis in the house, that should not be enough to put out a petition. There are obviously other reasons why you would definitely want this kid to be to be put to safety, but putting a kid into the foster system because your parents are using cannabis medically, that makes them better parents and makes them healthier. It does not make any sense. I don't know of any other medicine out there that improves the lives of parents that would definitely have their kids taken away.
Well, Gary, there's concerns that we've heard around allowing home grow in the state of Florida for a lot of these reasons. It's always, what about the children? So, Gary, you've written an amazing bill that actually creates growing centers that can be state regulated. You want to tell the public and our candidate a little bit more about that bill?
Now, interestingly enough, if the DEA goes ahead and changes the scheduling status, it's not going to change whether or not you can make opium at home. I think that's kind of interesting because we're also upset that there was no home grow in Amendment 3, and yet other medicines that are legal, once prescribed or whatever, there's no home grow. There's no home grow for opioids. There's no home grow for Tylenol, for God's sakes, and that's legal too. And there's a reason for that, and that is because when you're talking about medicine, you want to make sure that something is pure and potent, and properly potent, and is safe to be able to use, and the fact that it actually does the job that it's supposed to do. Not everybody can be an expert at growing cannabis. It's not a matter of just throwing the seeds into the ground and all of a sudden there you go. We do have toxic metals in the ground here in the state of Florida for various reasons, and the hemp plant is very, very good at sucking in all the nutrients out of the ground, including heavy metals, and putting it into the cola. So if you don't use the proper substrate, if you're not going with organic cocoa or things of that sort, you may just create a medicine that's not good enough for you. And so therefore, I thought it would be a good idea to set up these centers where people can have home grow, but under expert tutelage. So they know how to grow a safe product that, if regulated from the state version, from the state would say, yes, this is a pure potent, this is a potent. Plus the fact you can use what is called boutique strains. Which means that if you have a particular cultivar of cannabis you need for a particular condition you have, that is not sold at any of the stores because it's not popular enough for them to be able to grow and make a huge profit off of you, and you need this one particular thing, you need a home grow situation so you can grow this particular plant for yourself.
Gary, one thing, for you to speak on that, because I'm almost carrying, obviously we are yes on 3. That's one of our biggest thing. And we have to shout that from the rooftops, yes on 3. Just because there are so many issues associated with it. And, we're focusing on criminal justice reform and, economic benefit as well, what we can gain from Amendment 3. But I see in your chat, someone had mentioned, is it true Big Pharma is now going to prevent people from growing their own? Well, we really weren't supposed to grow our own to start with. And if you're doing so, that's on you. But, one thing, I'm kind of drawing a parallel. We talked a little bit about nurse practitioners before and autonomous practice and the ability to do this, that, and the other. Well, it has taken a lot of years for us to get to the point that primary care nurse practitioners are autonomous. Amendment 3 is not going to flip a light switch where everybody's going to get everything they want exactly how they want it. But I think of Amendment 3 as a start. Okay, we have to start somewhere, just like anything that is attempted in the legislature. We've got to start somewhere. and you get it in place, and hopefully what is put in place is not something that's going to end up being detrimental, but something that you can build on. And so, we're talking again, going back to the person talking about big pharma. Well, I'm sure we've all seen that commercial about the guy that goes to his yard shed and takes out his trowel and he's ready to start planting his own and growing his own pot. And big pharma comes and sits in the lawn chair and says, "Oh no, you're not going to be able to. It's only us." Well, let's think that through now, because if we want to get to that point of, as we're saying, growing and expanding this option, we've got to start somewhere. And we already have pharma per se in the production of this in the form of medical marijuana. So it's already started, they're already regulated, they're already vetted. We've got to start somewhere. So, it might come not with too many happy people saying we're just giving big pharma, but then as you go along, you again expand, you grow on this issue. You start, once you get to that point, you can create a pipeline, and now you can start having small businesses that can get into the field of their own business of cannabis production. So again, the frustration we always have with legislature is how slow everything is to come to pass. And we all want something yesterday. And that, in fact, is not how things go. I think the best thing that we can do is move forward as correctly as we can, so we don't need to go backwards and correct things we did not think of. Again, I will take you back to the nurse practitioners, because we were going for autonomous practice after we have fulfilled the requirements. Well, they only carved it out for primary care, which excluded every other nurse practitioner, including psychiatric providers. So again, the law was written imperfectly, and now we need to go back and correct that. We don't want that to happen with any of laws for that matter, but especially for cannabis. Let us be happy with the moving forward process, and then we keep moving forward and we keep building on it.
Now, fun fact, that particular ad is the centerpiece of a lawsuit from True Leave, claiming that that particular ad, it should be taken off of the air. I personally believe in the First Amendment, and if an organization wants to go ahead and put out an ad, even if it skirts the actual area of truth, because of the fact that it is a First Amendment situation. But basically, yeah, big, as they call it, big weed did actually write the bill. That is quite true. They just don't want people to know that.
Yeah.
But it is an imperfect bill at best. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of people are saying they don't want to vote yes on it because of who wrote it. Because of the fact that it was written by a multi-state organization that is currently working at nearly $1 billion market, and it will definitely make a huge profit off of this. But we're looking at it on a more wide view as far as that's concerned. We want to make certain that we can have access to a lot of things that are not in this bill. Yes, home grow is not in the bill, just like there's no thing that allows people to grow their own other medicine at home. There also is no protections in that bill for the medical program. And I am concerned because of the fact that we have seen other states like Washington State that cannibalize their medical program. And for those people who have a medical condition, who need a particular cultivar and might actually need some information as to how to properly use their medicine properly, the medical industry should still be involved, and there should still be a medical program so that people can have access to the right product at the right price and still have a doctor who's looking after them as far as they are actually working through a medical condition. So if it's a medical program, it can't be a quasi-medical program. It actually looks more like an adult use program, which is what we have right now. If you go into a cannabis store and ask them a medical question, you will see a deer in the headlights behind the guy behind the counter, who will also probably tell you, and this is a true story, my daughter has severe migraines. She went into a truly where she had gotten her medicine before, and she said, I need this particular nasal spray that gets rid of my migraines when the aura comes on. What? And they said, well, we don't have that anymore. We stopped taking that. I said, okay, what did you have in its place? And then there was some silence.
Yeah.
And they said, this stuff here, this 9-pound hammer, it'll really get you high. Okay. And that is when she took a line from that movie Platoon. She got down on her knees and looked up in the sky and says, is there anybody else smarter than me in here?
Yeah.
Rosemary, I just want to piggyback off of what you said and add to what Gary's talking about. The amendment isn't perfect, and there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to point that out. But the majority of the people that are pointing that out don't want the amendment to pass. They don't want, and not necessarily this amendment, but they don't want adult use marijuana to pass at all, right? You're talking to three guys here that have been through the medical marijuana program and done the medical marijuana activism here in Florida. We've been kicked and pushed into the mud and all different types of shit because of the medical marijuana system, and we've learned a few things. And quite honestly, it's the reason why we need legislators like you to be put into office. I mean, they will tell you up and down that there's something wrong with the amendment. There's something wrong with the amendment. There's something wrong with the way that medical marijuana was enacted. But the truth is that the legislator has enacted these things improperly, right? We can do all these baby steps that we're talking about. That process can be shortened if we just have common sense legislators in office. I mean, there would be, and it seems like we're talking about this compromise only on the left, because on the right side of things, right, on the red side of things, they're passing don't say gay bills. They're passing open carry bills,
Abortion
bans, all types of stuff.
Don't get me started on that one, because that's another whole podcast.
Well, we do got to touch on that a little bit for you. But
yeah, we can talk about abortion. We don't have to just talk about marijuana. But I mean, the thing is that the right isn't compromising, and we still have to compromise, though. We're not in power. So if we have the ability to progress, if we have people like you leading us in the legislature, and we get a majority of people like you in there, then we're these baby steps, all these complaints about the amendment, they're all going to go away.
We had a doctor who was in the legislature at the time that they were creating the implementing bill in 2017, who said that the only time you should be allowed to use cannabis is if it can be proven that you have unretractable pain and that nothing else will work. Well, here's the problem. You have to prove that nothing else will work. You have to either become addicted, or you have to overdose on the other medications before you can prove that you can use something that's safe and effective.
Right. Well, the other thing that I'm learning, and, I have said this from the beginning of my campaign, I'm not an expert on everything. No one can be. But what I have found in all of these months of talking to people is you learn from people and you reach out to the experts. And, you don't have to recreate the wheel all the time. Like you guys have said, there are other states that have done this. Well, let's learn from their mistakes. Let's learn what worked. Let's learn what didn't work. And let's take advantage of that. I mean, some states have really figured out. Nevada, I think, has been moving along and has kind of gotten a little bit more of a grip, of course, learning from the errors of Colorado and other states who came before them. But why do we have to recreate the wheel? Can we not pluck the best from what everyone has tried and move forward from there, rather than making the same mistake? Or again, that's a futile waste of time. But again, we have to learn. We've got to learn from the mistakes others make. We have to come up with something that is better, and we have to talk to people who know what they're talking about. Not in fact, not in opinion.
Now, your particular district has a large Latino population. I remember they have a great concert that gets to come on, the Latino Voices concert, where you're able to see access to Latin music from all over the world.
Yes,
right there in DeLand. And I'm wondering if maybe the gerrymandering of it was to work around that particular aspect. But from a party who currently is talking about mass deportations, which might just decimate our entire agriculture
There you
used to
go.
be here in the state of Florida, and I see you're going to be dealing with a lot of issues regarding that. Do you
Well,
have a lot of aspects in your practice?
the other thing that we keep saying as well is the legislature currently has wasted an inordinate amount of time creating problems where problems don't exist and not dealing with the problems that we have. Banning books, for goodness sake, that has never been a problem. You don't want your kid to read a book, tell the librarian at school they can't check it out. You know what I mean? That it's not, if you don't want it in the house, don't bring it home. How is this a problem? We've made a problem. I can go on and on about the waste of time that the Florida legislature has done with the supermajority that they currently have. And that's what has to change. And that's why we are working so hard to flip District 29, because we've got to start coming back to the table and being able to talk to each other again. When you've got a supermajority in any house of government, there is no compromise. There is no speaking to each other and coming up with sensible solutions. And again, it goes back to the old thing. I don't know about you guys, but I always learn more about a subject by speaking with someone who doesn't agree with me. That's how you learn about a subject, and that's how you come to compromise. And if we're constantly having conversation with like-minded people, how are we going to learn, and how are we going to come to some compromise? So it's not a win or lose. Right now, everybody is so concerned about winning and losing rather than compromising, and maybe we'll get a little of what we want, and we might not get that, but we keep moving forward and we come to compromise.
We constantly hear people say, do your research, man. Do your research. Do your research. And we don't know who the hell they're using for their research standard. When it came to COVID, I mean, there were so many faux sources of information that people were coming totally uneducated and totally uninformed and thinking they are.
Yeah.
And that is part of the issue we're constantly having to deal with.
Sure.
And in regards to book banning is concerned, I want everybody to do some research on this, because I have not found this not to be true yet. One particular book I have not seen banned anywhere is Mein Kampf.
Oh my!
I am just saying. First Amendment is First Amendment, regardless of the message, unless it intends on creating harm. And yet we have Project 2025, which is practically like taking out of Chapter 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Well, you guys need to do your research, because it's obvious that Kamala Harris is controlling the hurricanes.
She also controls the weather, from what I understand, too.
I'm glad you
that's pretty darn good for an airhead, right?
Well, I'm glad you brought up this issue around research, because I was going to say this for the news, but a recent survey in the Journal of Cannabis Research conducted by the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor surveyed over 1,100 U.S. adults regarding where they obtain their cannabis-related information. And respondents said they're more likely to get information from either family, friends, or websites like normal, and they were least likely to get their information from medical providers or government agencies. And so, historically, government-affiliated sources have either embellished or outright lied about marijuana and its effects. So it's no wonder that the public doesn't seem to consider them credible marijuana-related information. And I bring this up because, Gary, when they were trying to push THC caps in Tallahassee, they brought up a Harvard, educated doctor, Bertha Madras, to essentially confirm their assertion that THC amounts cause, psychosis. So, the government will bring you an expert in some ways that people just don't trust. And, Rosemarie, you mentioned earlier, nurse is the most trusted profession, politician the least trusted. So that's why we need you in the legislature. We need someone who's the most trusted in this country to bring the respectability and rebuild the trust back to the least trusted profession that we have in this country.
Hopefully, when I hear about things and people's frustrations, and now with all the flooding, get the politicians out, get something done. And I'm like, oh my God, I just want to say, give me a chance, okay? Give me a chance.
I think that the state needs to give you a chance to go to Tallahassee, bring the level of your experience, and add that to the layers of experience that others in the legislature need to hear, because they're not hearing it from their constituents necessarily, and they're not hearing it from the so-called experts coming in. By the way, SPURT is a drip under pressure, just so you know. So that's the root of expert, but they're drips under pressure. But we need to make certain that people like you and possibly you, actually go over there and start working for the people in the legislature. So give us a little bit about what your platform is right now, and why you want to have this position, and how people can get access to helping you.
Well, certainly part of it, and we've spoken of this today, is yes on 3. That's an absolute. And also yes on 4, which is a woman's right to choose. And, I'll speak on as a medical provider right now. The issue is we have to give women the right to make the choice that is right for them when they're in the circumstance that they are in. And it is not up to us to be the one to tell the woman what that choice is. Now, it doesn't matter how I feel about abortion. What matters is my support of a woman to make the choice that is right for her. So abortions occur for so many reasons, but so many people are so blinded by the lazy woman who does not use contraception, to which I counter with, what about the lazy man that couldn't use contraception as well? But the other part of that equation is, if you look at women's health, abortion has been around forever. It became safe with Roe v. Wade. And now that we have abortion bans, abortions now will be unsafe again. And that is already coming into play. Abortion will still exist. Women will resort to things that they used to do before, and they end up dying or maiming themselves or dying. Back alley abortions, whatever you want to call it, will occur. But it becomes a social justice issue as well, because abortion is still available in other states. So who will be able to go get their abortions are those who have the means and accessibility to do so. And a lot of women don't. They don't have the ability to take time off work, or they do not have the finances to get out of state, to go to another state to get this healthcare service for them. So we're talking about social justice issues. Now we're talking about maternal and infant mortality rates, because we can see the state of Texas right now already has enough time has passed for their near total abortion ban, that infant mortality rates and neonatal mortality rates have skyrocketed, because now we have babies being born that had no chance of surviving. And women have had to carry these babies to term, and then these infants die shortly after birth. So what have we succeeded or achieved by doing this? This is a women's health issue, and that's the bottom line. It's a women's health issue, and it is not our right to tell a woman what to do. And it's also putting a strain on the state when we get into healthcare providers, as far as OBGYN providers. They're becoming afraid. They are afraid to provide service. They don't want to go to jail. They don't want to get arrested. So their freedom and livelihood is at stake as well. And they're leaving the state. So now we have what we call healthcare deserts in the state of Florida, where there are not even OBGYN providers in geographic areas, because there just are not any. And so pregnant women and women who need GYN care don't even have that ability. And then we have the problem with OBGYN providers not wanting to come to the state. Who the heck would want to come to a state with such rules that limit their ability to practice? Again, this subject is so multifaceted. Not just when we talk about a woman's right to choose, but we can talk about it economically, with businesses not wanting to come to the state because of the stringent laws that is in place. But, none the least is women's health and a woman's right to live and a woman's right to make her choice. So, of course, yes on 4 and a woman's right to choose is another one of my platforms. Flooding and insurance. What we just got through a hurricane. Okay, this is not going to make our insurance crisis any better. This is a multifaceted problem. It's been a lack of transparency that has caused this problem. There are things in place that can be expanded to bring homes up to standards so that they are insurable. So yes, the homeowner's insurance crisis has to be addressed. We have to understand what caused the crisis, and we have to start making the changes that have to be made to rectify this situation. There already are some things in place. As we said, My Safe Home Florida was a Senate bill that went through that allows funding for those who meet financial criteria to bring their homes up to insurable standards so that they can get homeowners insurance. That program should be expanded. So homeowners insurance, of course, is going to be a hot topic. It has been, and it will be now after Milton. Thank you very much. The other thing that is Medicaid expansion. Being a healthcare worker, Florida is one of 10 states that turned down Medicaid expansion. Well, what the heck was the reason for that? What was the reason for denying people the right to get some sort of insurance so that they can get health care? And help us to understand and acknowledge that it is far cheaper to treat a problem before it becomes a 5-alarm fire than it is to treat the 5-alarm fire. So being a nurse practitioner, we are always talking prevention, screening prevention. And, you treat things early. First of all, you try to prevent it, and then you treat it early before it becomes a major problem. Control the diabetes before people have their heart attack and stroke. Control the blood pressure before they have a stroke and end-stage kidney disease and have to go on dialysis. I can go, again, talking, we have to put our focus where it needs to be, prevention. But again, insurance companies, all they care about is the moment and the insured. They're not worried about preventing end-stage renal disease by uncontrolled diabetes because they may not be the insurance carrier for that person at that time, okay? But we need Medicaid expansion because people need access to health care. Again, this is the most wonderful country on the planet, and people do not even have basic health care, and that is abominable, in my opinion.
Well, we actually don't have a healthcare system as much as we have a sick care system. Nobody's really concerned about their patients being healthy. They're more concerned with the fact that their patients are sick, and that because sick people have to pay for healthcare more than those people who are healthy. And
that's not what nurse practitioners think.
Yeah.
Our whole focus of care is health maintenance, is teaching people what to do to keep themselves healthy. It's as simple as a freaking vaccination sometimes. You know what I mean? And you have to twist people's arm to get them to have a flu shot. But people die from influenza. So it's prevention, it's health promotion, and it's the very, very basic thing that we have to start implementing. As you said, rather than waiting for it to be a sick care system, we needed a well care system.
And we greatly appreciate you having that particular situation. Now, to help you out with your ongoing campaign.
Yeah.
How can people help you? How do they access your campaign for them to give you their time, treasure, or talent?
Well, our website is votelatham.com. And on the website, certainly there's the ability to contribute to the campaign. And also, you can find out more about the campaign. You can see where I'm going to be. I have 2 more events today that I'm going to, being out in the community. So people, I have the opportunity to talk to people as well. We have been out there. We're 8 months into the campaign, and my campaign was one of 6 in the state of Florida that qualified by petition, which means we gathered enough petitions to qualify without paying the fee. And that means we were out there in the community talking to people and getting those signatures and finding out what is going on. And that's what we are supposed to be doing. Your representative is supposed to be out there talking to you, finding out what is going on so that you can help them because you're their voice. So yes, votelatham.com. You have the ability to contribute. We also have a Facebook page, Rosemarie Latham for Florida District 29. We've got a Facebook page. And those are the best ways. There's a Facebook link on the website, so you can get on the website and link over to the Facebook page as well. So,
guys, when you're doing your research in regards to who you want to vote for, I would definitely take a look at the situation that Rosemarie has talked about. Who is there by petition, and who is there who just paid the fee out of the massive amount of campaign donations they're getting? Because that shows you a lot of their mindset, is where they feel that they're going to get into office by financial proxy versus the needs and the wishes of the people.
To get out there. Yes, sir.
Well, Rosemarie, we appreciate you joining us, on the show today. We definitely want to have you come back on the show after you're elected and
Thank you.
Take a victory lap. And of course, your freshman class in the legislature is going to have a big task ahead of them, and that's actually implementing Amendment 3. We know so often here in Florida that the will of the voters sometimes can be subverted through implementation of a constitutional amendment with extra hidden clauses and fees and such. And one thing about this amendment is that it does allow the legislature to license other business entities, and it kind of gives them a pathway to breaking up the currently vertically integrated system, allow more players into this. I continue to advocate that our licensed hemp businesses should be the first ones to get a crack at breaking up the vertical integration. Carlos is obviously happy as a licensed hemp business for that stance, but the fact is that we have folks that have been trusted, that have been doing the right thing,
already vetted and right,
exactly, already vetted by the state. So there's some great opportunity there. Right. And to all those medical patients out there who are wondering, we don't charge taxes on medicine in Florida. So if you're wondering why you should keep your medical card, that is definitely one of the biggest reasons. But also, as Gary touched on, right now the amount of licenses in Florida to operate in the cannabis industry are tied to the patient count. And we know that if we go adult use, patient counts typically do go down in states once adult use happens. So, essentially locking in and creating a locked oligopoly is not something that we want to see. So addressing how, we continue to license businesses is going to be something you all are going to have to tackle as well. But, we hope to have you back on for a victory lap after the November election, and best wishes on everything that you got going on. And with that, Carlos, I think it's time for the news.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Do you guys know what happened to Vernon?
He's not here.
All right, so at the top of the news hour, we're going to talk about what's going on in Saipan, which is the Commonwealth of the North Mariana Islands. Folks who might not know that, but that is actually a United States territory, and that's why this is big news, because a U.S. territory with a population of about 56,000 people has just signed legislation into law that ends pre-employment testing of marijuana screening as a requirement for government jobs. Public Law 23-27 eliminates pre-employment testing for most public jobs. However, the ban does not apply to those seeking safety-sensitive positions or those subject to federal drug testing regulations. This U.S. territory did legalize the retail sale and use of cannabis in 2018. In recent years, lawmakers in 3 states, Michigan, Nevada, and Washington, as well as numerous other municipalities and counties nationwide, including Atlanta, Cleveland, D.C., Philadelphia, and St. Louis, have similarly ended pre-employment marijuana screening for most public employees. Several other states, including California, Connecticut, Minnesota, Montana, New Jersey, New York, and Rhode Island, have enacted broader workplace protections, limiting employers' ability to either test or sanction workers for their use of cannabis while off the job. Now, Gary has been pushing for our public employment, worker protection bill now for 5 years. We've brought it up to leadership. We've had members of the Republican leadership on the show here in previous episodes. So let's hopefully that this is the session that this gets done, especially since we're going to be moving to an adult use state. Understand that even in adult use states like up here in Maryland, I have advocated and testified to end urinalysis testing as part of marijuana pre-employment testing. So there still is progress that has to be made even in legal states. Now, moving on. A recent analysis coming out of the Journal of Cannabis Research with researchers who are affiliated with Brigham Young University assessed the relationship between cannabis use and physical activity among adults 18 and older in several states and territories from 2016 to 2022. And they determined that current cannabis use is significantly associated with higher prevalence of physical activity. The prevalence of physical activity is significantly greater in U.S. states and territories where cannabis is legalized for recreational and medical purposes versus not being legal. The study's authors concluded the results of this study indicate that legal medical cannabis promotes greater physical activity in those experiencing chronic medical conditions, and legal recreational cannabis even more so promotes greater physical activity in those not experiencing chronic medical conditions. Surprise, people getting high want to go outside and experience nature. They don't necessarily just want to sit on the couch and eat Funyuns and Cheetos all day. So the lazy stoner myth continues to be taken down by science time and time again. Now, let's going to talk about a little bit of science here. A recent clinical trial of dronabinol capsules, which are the FDA-approved synthetic THC, significantly mitigates agitation in patients with Alzheimer's disease, according to a placebo-controlled clinical trial data that was presented at the 2024 International Psychogeriatric Association Conference in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Investigators affiliated with Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore and Tufts University in Boston assessed the safety and efficacy of dronabinol versus placebo in 75 patients with severe Alzheimer-associated agitation. Compared to the placebo group, subjects who consumed a 5 milligram dose of dronabinol experienced a 30% reduction in agitation. Researchers said that the efficacy of oral THC was similar to that of traditional antipsychotics, but that dronabinol possessed a superior safety profile. Several clinical trials dating back to the 1990s have similarly shown positive results for the use of dronabinol in patients with Alzheimer's disease. And more recent studies have also reported that the use of cannabis plant-derived extracts reduces Alzheimer's disease-related symptoms, including agitation, irritability, and sleep disturbances. Preclinical data has shown that both THC and synthetic THC agonists can modulate neuroinflammation and the formation of amyloid plaque in the brain, both of which are believed to play a key role in the development of Alzheimer's disease. So I can tell you with this personally, with my own dad suffering from dementia, cannabis, quality cannabis oil can just work wonders with helping mitigate the symptoms of these oxidative diseases brought on by ischemic attacks, people who suffer from strokes, people who suffer from Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's. Real cannabis helps. Unfortunately, my dad never got the opportunity to take advantage of the medical cannabis system because it was defeated via amendment in 2014. And in 2017, he passed away in January before they actually implemented the Amendment 2 in July. That being said, there are plenty of other families out there who can benefit from this. And so we need to not only make sure that we're expanding access and treatment in the state of Florida for medical cannabis patients, but we need to continue to fight the federal prohibition of it because cannabis does save lives. Now, moving on to more clinical trials and hearing more about how cannabis is helping folks. The topical application of cream containing CBD and THC reduces itch severity in patients with chronic kidney disease associated with pruritus. According to placebo-controlled clinical data published in the Journal of Kidney Medicine, investigators associated with Thammasat University in Thailand assessed the use of cannabis-infused cream versus placebo in patients with pruritus, and subjects were administered either cream or placebo for 4 weeks, and the patients assessed at baseline and at 2 weeks and at 4 weeks. Compared with the placebo group, kidney disease patients using cannabis-infused cream experienced less itching and improved quality of life. Doctor, again, the study demonstrated that cannabis-containing cream is an effective treatment for chronic kidney disease, pruritus, and hemodialysis patients with limited adverse side effects. Further studies with larger sample sizes and longer durations of follow-up are suggested to ensure the reliability of results, especially regarding the itch-related quality of life. But each and every year we see more and more things come out, and we always hear politicians who want to hold the line in that we need more research. We need more research. The research is being done. How about we just legalize it already? How about we expand qualifying conditions? How about we actually create a system where people have safe access to this? A recent op-ed came out that was produced by our deputy director at National Normal, Paul Armentano, that said marijuana prohibition has been a fraud from the get-go. And I just want to read some excerpts from it because I think it's valid for everything we've talked about today. Since its inception, efforts to criminalize marijuana and to stigmatize those who consume it have been based upon hyperbole, stereotype, and outright lies. The initial push for cannabis criminalization, which began in earnest more than a century ago, had little to do with preserving public health or safety. Instead, the move was to prosecute cannabis users and based primarily on sensationalism and xenophobia. For instance, a 1927 story in the New York Times headlined, "Mexican Family Goes Insane," and farcically conclaimed that a widow and her 4 children have been driven insane by eating the marijuana plant, according to doctors who say there is no hope of saving the children's lives and that the mother will be insane for the rest of her life. An academic paper titled "Marijuana," published in the Journal of Law and Criminology in 1933, similarly made over-the-top allegations about marijuana's supposed dangers, with an author writing, "The inevitable result is insanity, from which those familiar with it describe as absolutely incurable and without exception ending in death." And by 1937, Harry J. Anslinger, who was America's first drug czar, has successfully lobbied Congress to ban cannabis nationwide. He did so through the continuous use of racist rhetoric. He even said in front of Congress, there are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S. Most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz and swing, results from marijuana use. The marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others. Now, you fast forward to 1971, and that's when the Nixon administration declared drug abuse to be public enemy number 1. And the linchpin of this campaign was marijuana prohibition, which Congress had just classified as a Schedule I controlled drug, the strictest federal category available. And yet previously, now that we have the Nixon tapes being declassified and coming out and being leaked, he acknowledged he didn't think cannabis was particularly dangerous, and he lamented the ridiculous penalties faced for those possessing it. Nonetheless, he and those in his administration doubled down on the supposed marijuana threat for reasons that were entirely political, as his own domestic policy chief, John Ehrlichman, later acknowledged that they couldn't make it illegal to be against the Vietnam War or to be black, but they could get the public to associate hippies with weed and blacks with heroin. And criminalizing both heavily, they could disrupt those communities and arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Now, 50 years later, marijuana still remains a Schedule I drug, the same classification as heroin, and various politicians still reiterate many of the same myths and mistruths, but are slowly turning the page. According to Gallup, 70% of U.S. adults think marijuana should be legal. That's an increase of 19 percentage points since 2014, when Colorado and Washington became the first states to implement adult use legalization. 24 states have now done so, and no state has ever repealed marijuana legalization. There is no buyer's remorse when it comes to marijuana legalization among voters. And in recent weeks, both major party candidates, for the first time in history, have called for ending the practice of arresting and jailing marijuana consumers. It's about time, and marijuana prohibition has been a fraud from the beginning, has been propagated by politicians and bureaucrats who are in on the sham, and it's high time that we end it. So with that note, I want us to formally release to the public our voter guide for candidates. Rosemarie Latham, who's on the show today, is actually on this endorsement guide as well. Carlos, why don't you go ahead and flash the first one, which is our candidates at the top of the ticket. These are our candidates running for president, U.S. Senate, and U.S. Congress in the state of Florida. These are folks we're encouraging. Now, I do want to be clear, I'm probably going to get some criticism on this, but I am going to defend it. Kamala Harris was the sponsor of the MORE Act when she was in Congress, which, of course, was the act to remove cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. So, of course, she wins. If you want to call it a tie, she definitely goes ahead and takes the cake on that one. Now,
I don't understand, because Donald Trump signed the hemp bill.
Donald Trump said drug dealers should get the death penalty. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Kamala Harris and sponsor legalization over saying that you guys selling Nick Sacks should get the death penalty. So
Well, I do think that Trump did not read the farm bill any more than he's ever read the Bible, for that matter.
well,
Or the Constitution.
go back real quick, Carlos, because there is one other one I do want to highlight. Debbie McCursa Powell, who's actually been on the rotation, is running for United States Senate against Rick Scott. Rick Scott, the same Rick Scott who does not support the Doobie Act and allowing people with cannabis use to hold government jobs or security clearances. The same Rick Scott that voted against FEMA funding and doesn't show up for FEMA funding votes. The same Rick Scott that doesn't trust women for their own reproductive health rights. Okay, Debbie McCursa Powell is the reason that we selected for the Senate, because she actually came on the rotation. She actually is in support of any cannabis prohibition. Now, there is one saving grace. Brian Mast, who's a Republican in Florida District 21, is the only Republican to make the list, because he's the only one that's actually been pushing actual federal legislation to make a difference. Some of you might say, well, what about Matt Gaetz in District 1? Look, we don't associate with alleged pedophiles. I'm sorry. That was a deal breaker for us here with Matt Gaetz. But, the Republican delegation from Florida, other than Brian Mast, has not really shown up, and there are some solid candidates here. Do your research, take a look at them. But let's move on to the next page, which is important. State attorneys, the actual prosecutors who decide whether or not you go to jail. I can tell you that in the 9th Circuit, Monique Worrell, and on the 13th Circuit, Andrew Warren, folks who have been on this show, folks who are solid when it comes to cannabis prohibition and choosing to actually not put people in jail but give them diversion. There's some great state attorneys out there running. Make sure you go out and cast your votes. Of course, for the amendments, yes on 3, yes on 4. What Rosemarie brought up today about trusting people with their own health care and control of their own bodies. The same applies to when it comes to cannabis use. Let's trust people to trust what they want to put in their bodies and maintain that freedom. Yes on 3, yes on 4. And then let's move on to the next one, which is the state level races. In the state Senate, you have, down the ballot, all the odd number districts are up for election this year, and there's some great folks that are running that we're supporting. We even have some that are going to be guests on the show before the end of the election. And then moving on in that column on the right is State House. And let's move on. There's some more State House candidates on the next slide we want to share with folks. Obviously, you see a lot of D's on here, but you're going to see that we also have had folks on the show that we support, like Joe Hanush, who was on a couple weeks ago, who's a libertarian. Okay, and then you see Rosemarie right there, Florida District 29. So again, these are on our Instagram page. They're up on Facebook as well. Feel free to share them and such with folks. Tell the good news loud and wide. Let's go to the next page, Carlos. Who else we got? We got some more solid folks here. We got Tyrell Hicks in District 68, who's actually an independent, no party affiliate, who's running, that we've endorsed. So he's been on the rotation. You can go back and check out folks' previous episodes here. Ashley Brundage in 65, who's been on the show a couple times. So let's move on to the next page, which I believe is the last one. There are 120 House seats in Florida up for grabs this year. If you want to change the makeup of the legislature, now is the time to do it. You can see we got Jackie Gross Kellogg on here, who's been on the show as well. Go back, check out these previous episodes of the rotation, find out why these folks were endorsed by Suncoast Normal. You can hear it. We have a great group of folks running. And again, we want to break this supermajority of the prohibitionist party that we have in this state of Florida and really put in and force our politicians and legislature back to the table to make America what it always has been, in a place where we can have vigorous debate and determine safe public policy for all of us. So that's all we got today, Carlos, other than one last thing. I do want to encourage folks, and I'm going to drop a link here for you to post. Our Key West legal seminar is coming up in December 5th through December 7th. It is a fully accredited legal seminar by all states that require continuing legal education credits, CLEs, for practicing attorneys. In addition, it's a just amazing, over 30-year tradition with Normal of having a legal seminar in Key West. It is definitely something that's folks are going to really enjoy. being at the Pier House Resort and Spa. They seem to have lifted prohibition requirements for many, many years. It's gonna smell funky during the Normal Legal Conference, but it's also a great opportunity to connect with our Normal Legal Committee and hear folks with Normal who have been around for many years. Non-lawyers are also welcome. So if you don't need the CLEs, there's a discounted rate there, and it gives lawyers an opportunity also to network and join the Normal Legal Committee. So just go to normal.org/Key West and join us. Rosemarie, I saw you had a question.
Yeah, I do want to, you mentioned 120 seats in the House of Representatives, and 84 of them now are held by Republicans and 36 are held by Democrats. That's called a supermajority. We have to flip at least 5 seats to break the supermajority. So don't forget that.
And we have done at least one of those ourselves. I should mention the fact that Tom Keene, who is actually a Suncoast Normal member.
Yes.
He said last time it was on the show that we could take credit for that. So,
and Jackie Kellogg, when she came on right after that, she got a 3-point bump. So we expect to see a bump in your next poll, Rosemary.
Very good. Thank you.
It's about to go crazy for you, Rosemary.
Absolutely. And just so you know, again, people were asking, how do we come up with the ideas to who to endorse? The first thing was this fantastic survey, which was not a push poll, mind you, and no trick questions that Chris put out, and we sent it to absolutely every single candidate, regardless of party affiliation, and went to see who was going to send them back. The vast majority of people who sent it back happened to be Democrats. We did have some Republicans, some of which we looked at and said, well, yeah, it's glad that you're good with this, but we're concerned about some of the other policies you have or some of the other lifestyle choices, as in our friend Matt Gaetz, that would disqualify them. But it wasn't just the survey. It was also other things. And there are folks who didn't actually fill out the survey and send it to us. And we felt that their voting record in Congress or in the legislature was important enough to make certain that they were included in the people that we want to endorse.
Yep. And there's also people that are like really easy to like not endorse, like say Osgood, who was like, oh, if you smoke marijuana, you'd end up doing coke in the dumpster.
Yeah, or people who thank God for slavery. Sorry, Kim Daniels, we're back in the write-in candidate.
There's a lot of people that are just easy not to endorse. Yeah.
And by the way, in regards to one more medical thing before we let you go, Rosemary, and that is that what Chris was saying in regards to the control of pruritus, and that's the correct pronunciation, has a lot to do with this nervous disorder, kind of like fibromyalgia, which is also not one of the qualifying conditions, or is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which also contains not only hyperextensive joints that become hyperinflamed, but also skin disorders that also cause pruritus, and also autism, and also Alzheimer's, which are two brain diseases that, once mitigated with cannabis, allows folks to prevent one thing what is called eloping, where folks don't know where they're going, and so they, for some odd reason, head towards water. This happens a lot with autistic kids who end up drowning. And in fact, during the storm, a person with long stage dementia did walk out into the storm waters and drown. So once again, these things could have been there to help them had they had access to them or had increased access to them. These are the things we worry about. These are the things we're concerned about. This is why we would want to see Rosemarie in the legislature, so we're not just knocking our heads and talking to people who are essentially like talking to dining room tables.
Yeah.
Indeed. Rosemarie, thanks for being a trooper and sticking it out.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for all you do as well.
And Gary, I pronounce it pruritus like Wilford Brimley pronounces it diabetes.
Diabetes. Yeah.
Diabetes.
I'll watch out for that diabetes.
We'll see y'all on the